Hi, everyone, and welcome to our next episode in our series, Devotional Mysticism and Plant Teachers. In today's episode, Rukmini Walker and I will be exploring trees and colonies of trees, the roots and the underground network of trees, and really how the spirits of trees can inform the way we think about community, our own spiritual lives, and our spiritual communities. So we'll be weaving all of this together today. Trees are part of a large interconnected community, and they not only interact with their own species, with other species. So, I think Rukmini and I both really honor and love speaking about the power of diversity. And so this will come through in today's talk in how the trees interact with each other and how they support diversity within the forests. So thank you so much, Rukmini, for being here with us today.
Thank you so much. Let me begin with a few prayers, as we do. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksun Milatam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangalam Ghayate Girim Yatkipastamaham Bande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Vanchakapatarabhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So let's dive in. Let's dive into this exploration of trees and an interesting part of trees also in winter, because we often think about trees and their glory of their fruiting and their their large greenness. But yeah, let's just start off by having you share a little bit about kind of what inspires you right now about trees.
Yeah, I feel like the trees are, they're like sentinels or skeletal sentinels, like reaching up to heaven, and they're silently putting down these deep roots and growing invisibly and silently under the soil. We have no idea what a world there is under the soil, just like in the ocean. We have no idea, these unexplored territories. So I think of trees, I think of the selflessness of trees, giving shade, giving wood, giving fruits, giving flowers, giving healing remedies, and giving examples of tolerance and strength against all obstacles. I mean, here we are in winter. You're in Minnesota. And I just feel like, wow, all seasons, freezing winter, the blazing heat of summer, torrential rains. And just as humans, we're so destructive. Humans cut them down, clear cutting the forests, stripping the Amazon rainforest, and destroying unknown possible herbal medicines, right? Potential lost cures for innumerable diseases, who knows what, right? And and I think of how our culture places humans at the top of this pyramid of power and denigrating the earth, the animals, the trees, the plant life, the aquatics. Everybody's down below us. And I think of how as humans we think of ourselves as masters of the universe, or if we're a bit more conscious, we think of ourselves as stewards of life, right, of all life. We are the stewards of all life on the planet. But if I can bring up the path of bhakti yoga, or what I would call the yoga of love in action, we aspire for humility, and we try to invert that pyramid of power and place the grass and the trees at the top, with ourselves as human beings at the bottom, and learning from them, trying to pay homage to them, and observing the humility of grass. I often think the word grass is plural, right? So many individual blades of grass together in a community called grass, or the tolerance of trees, like the forest is also a plural, right? It's a community of trees. Just reaching for heaven in this interconnected community, communicating through the air, as you said, and underground through the roots. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. And as you were speaking, the way that you described them weathering all the seasons, I was just thinking about, like, imagine you and I standing outside just in one place all year long, and whatever came, whatever storm, lightning, blizzard, we just had to stand there and bear it. I mean, what a life. And 20, 30, 50, 80, 100 years of just, and the oldest tree, I think, is over 5,000 years old, Methuselah, up in California. Just, I mean, thousands of years of just standing there, tolerating. What an image that is. And I was listening to this podcast with an herbalist, and she was saying how she likens her favorite people to trees, like when she goes into the forests and she, sees trees, the trees are her friends, and they're like the best kind of friends you can have, where they just stand there and they listen and they tolerate you and all your blah, 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 blahs and
I love it.
ups and downs. And, and then certainly the roles can switch, but just what a great image that is of tolerance and real, just being there, being able to just show up and be there continuously for a friend or for another person or for your community.
Beautiful, so beautiful. And the way they're there, and as you say, they're silent, and they're swaying in the wind and in the air. They just have such grace, right? And they're always giving in communion with the other trees around them. It's so interesting. And then you mentioned the redwoods. For me, the redwoods are so fascinating because they're the oldest trees in the world. They're the tallest trees in the world. But there's so many amazing things, but one of the most amazing things is that they have a very shallow root system. You'd think that they would have the deepest roots of any tree, but their root system is very shallow. And as soon as one baby redwood sprouts, it immediately starts wrapping its roots around the redwood tree that's next to it. And in that way, every tree in the redwood forest is either directly or indirectly connected to every other tree. So talk about community. It's so beautiful. It's what a metaphor for the world at large. We forget our interconnectivity. What happens to someone in Ukraine or Syria is happening to me, and is happening to my children and my future, and the world. I think that's really, really that invisible divine force, the unseen invisible divine force, connecting and guiding all life.
Yeah. It reminds me of the work of an ecologist who discovered the mycorrhizal network, which is this fungal network underground. Basically, it's been likened to the internet. It's like the plant internet. And through these little tiny kind of white mycorrhizal fungal lines, like, kind of like our lines that we have underground, made of silica to connect our internet. The plants have that. And yeah, her name is Suzanne Simard. And about 2 decades ago, so like 20 years ago, she discovered she was, doing work trying to understand how trees communicate, like the relationship between trees. And she discovered that trees communicate their needs and send each other nutrients via a network of lattice fungi buried in the soil. And one of the things that this scientific discovery overturned was this idea of Darwin's theory of competition and survival of the fittest, and that everything in nature is just fighting with each other for resources and nutrients and space, and it's like a battlefield. But instead, what her discoveries found was that actually forests are like societies. They're actually communities. So I just wanted to read a little bit. She said, or this was written in an article in the New York Times by Ferris Jabber, and it's called The Social Life of Forests. And I'll include a link to this in the description of this talk. But it said, he said, an old growth forest is neither an assemblage of stoic organisms, which is Darwin's theory, tolerating one another's presence, nor is it a merciless battle royale. Instead, it's a vast, ancient, intricate society. There is conflict in a forest, but there is also negotiation, reciprocity, and even selflessness.
Isn't that beautiful? It's amazing to me that that's coming from, I'm so conscious of the gifts of the feminine voice. And I feel like, isn't that fascinating that that came from a woman's point of view, you know? And it's really interesting because, yeah, Darwin actually, he took ideas from the Padma Purana, one of the ancient Puranas of India, but he missed. So what is the principle that's actually evolving? He missed the soul. He missed because in the animal species, it said in the Puranas that the soul is just gradually going up and up and up through the species until that soul comes to the human form of life, at which point we have a choice. It's like a pivotal point that we can choose to go in any direction because we have this developed consciousness, which we so often misuse. I remember when I was a child, I grew up in suburban Chicago, and in the Lincoln Park Zoo, there was in the lion house, they had a cage, and up above the cage, it said the most dangerous, something like this, the most dangerous animal known in the world, something like that. So you're intrigued and you walk up to the cage and it's a mirror.
Wow.
It's a mirror. So, the most dangerous, destructive creature known in the universe is ourselves, right? Or like Pogo said, we have seen the enemy and he is us. So yeah, so this idea of living, I love what you were saying, because to me it's so interesting. We think of trees as being so vertical, but the horizontal outreach of community and reciprocity. So there's this vertical outreach to each other, and then there's this horizontal outreach to each other, and then there's this vertical outreach to heaven, I would say, to divinity, to reaching up,
Yeah. And it's interesting too, kind of this the idea of the divine feminine in nature. There's this society that was created of researchers in British Columbia, and they are it's called the Mother Network. They are exploring the Mother Network. It's called the Mother Tree Project, and basically what they're doing is they're looking at how some of these larger old growth trees are taking care of the whole forest, basically mothering the forest. And so in their mapping of the fungal network, of this mycorrhizal network, their research showed that the biggest and oldest trees are the most connected in nodes in the forest. These highly connected hub trees, known as the mother trees, share their excess carbon and nitrogen through the mycorrhizal network with the understory seedlings, which can increase seedling survival. These mother trees act in this way as central hubs communicating with the young seedlings around them. In a single forest, a mother tree can be connected to hundreds of other trees. But this is interesting. Their research showed that the kin seedlings receive more carbon from mother trees than stranger seedlings do. So they actually feed their own seedlings more. However, they will send carbon to other seedlings in the neighborhood as well. They've also found that they will sometimes send um, this carbon cross species. So there are some other like balsam fir and birch species that these mother trees will also feed. So, I mean, isn't that just amazing?
Amazing interconnectivity. Um, this is the spirituality of existence. This is what's so important for us to understand. It's so interesting, to look at, I love our conversation because we're looking at science and we're looking at spirituality and we're looking at how they come together. And another thing about the so-called stewardship of the forest or the stewardship of the earth, I found it really interesting about the redwood trees that there was one point where the rangers in the redwood forest were noticing that no new baby redwoods were sprouting up, and they didn't know why, and they started researching it, and they realized that they were taking such good care, such good stewardship of the forest, that they were preventing forest fires, and forest fires are necessary to crack open that very, very hard seed of the redwood tree. So that intense heat of the redwood, of the forest fire, cracks open the redwood seed, and then the seed can nestle in the ash from the forest fire. And then because some trees have been burnt down, just the right amount of light. Isn't this divinity working in action? Just the right amount of light comes through the trees to allow those seeds to sprout as they're nestled in that ash.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing how destructive we can be when I almost think of it as like a little child trying to help the butterfly come out of the chrysalis, right? I'll just help because I'm so friendly. But no, we can so easily interfere with nature if we don't respect nature and honor its interworkings and
Yeah. Yeah,
the
because if
natural.
you open up the cocoon, the butterfly's wings aren't strong enough. It's that pushing against the cocoon and that fighting through that dries and prepares its wings to fly. And we think we're doing this help, but you know, yeah, we just don't know enough. Where our minds are so, we use such a small amount of our brains and we have such limited capacity. I mean, like you said at the beginning, we think of ourselves at the top of this network, of this pyramid. But, when we look at the trees in this way, and as we start to really understand their intelligence, it's like, well, we don't really know that much, do we?
Yeah, and I think it really needs to evoke humility. I mean, we're talking about tolerance and how the trees show us strength and show us tolerance, but how much humility it needs to evoke in our hearts. I always think of how in India they always compare a wise person with a tree that's heavy laden with fruits, the way a tree that's heavy laden with fruits will bend down. So wise people bend down in humility. They're not, erect and feeling so proud, but so I think all of this that we're uncovering or that's been uncovered for us by, greater minds than ourselves, I think it has to evoke some sense of humility and how can we also reciprocate? How can I listen better? How can I approach the forest in silence and in respect?
Yeah.
Um,
And it's interesting to look at the ways that, I think there's a renewed interest since COVID, since the pandemic. There's a renewed, when we were stuck in our houses for so long, people got back to nature. It was like, well, that was a safe place, was to be outdoors in the woods. And so, I think that there is one of the gifts of the pandemic has been a reconnection with nature and the natural world, and how important it is for our mental health. And in one of our talks we did on evergreens, we talked about that compound alpha pinene found in pine trees, that in a pine forest, it's shown to be anxiety, antidepressant. Just breathing in those volatile oils is so good for our central nervous system and for our mental health. So, I think, yeah, we're starting to renew our interests, which I think is great. And even if we go back to other, very prolific writers and thinkers, like you and I were talking about Tolkien, who wrote the Lord of the Rings series, and how just so many ways that nature shows up in some of these epic adventures, or in the stories of Krishna, like Krishna in the forests with the Tulsi and all the plants and the trees, just the impact that these writers have, their imagination has evoked in our minds. And Tolkien in particular, as a really early environmentalist.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, when you think also, I mean, just going back to this cracking of the redwood seed and the impact of crisis, that can we tolerate some kind of fire of ordeal in order to experience some kind of unseen miracles or new growth? I was just thinking, I have this sign in my bathroom that says that there are two ways to live in the world. One is though everything is a miracle, and one is though nothing is a miracle. So the first is about reciprocity and humility and being open to hear and to learn. I have this nice quote from John Muir. He says, "I went out for a walk and stayed out till sundown, for by going out I found was really going in."
Ah.
Like that. And then he says, "This grand show of nature is eternal." I love this. He says, "It is always sunrise somewhere. The dew is never all dried at once. A shower is forever falling, vapor ever rising." So beautiful.
Yeah.
And then if I could share one more from him, just to keep them all together, because this one's also beautiful. He says, "God has cared for these trees, saved them from drought, disease, avalanches, and 1,000 tempests and floods, but he cannot save them from fools."
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
when
And
we,
this is kind of what Tolkien was saying, in his writings too, the power of these forests in Middle Earth. So it was really interesting because, in his books, he portrays nature as a living, breathing entity. He was trying to show that these forests, that they all work together, and that nature was serving in the Lord of the Rings, serving all of the characters as a mentor. That was one of his intentions, that nature serves as a mentor, guiding its visitors, though not always in the desired direction, providing them with hiding places and encouraging their internal growth.
amazing, amazing. And, that reminds me that, in India, all trees are respected, all plants are respected traditionally anyway, but certain trees are considered very sacred. And the banyan tree, which could be like 2,000 feet across, it's like a whole forest in itself.
Mm.
And the whole community would be sheltering under a banyan tree, like holy people would be sitting there and speaking their knowledge under the banyan tree, or merchants are doing their negotiations, selling their stuff, whatever. And students, kids are there under the banyan tree in community, learning their lessons. And it's such a beautiful thing. And then the Tulsi tree, I mean, you as an herbalist can speak so much about the Tulsi, but according to tradition, the Tulsi is a goddess who's taken the shape of a tree in order to help us access the path of devotion. So she's like a goddess messenger who's can take our prayers and bring them to the lotus feet of Krishna. So
Mm.
it's so beautiful. And at the same time, maybe you can share about how medicinal Tulsi is, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I mean, I think I love the way that you described these examples because I think, sometimes it's like, okay, well, a forest, but then when we think of the image of a banyan tree, so many of us can imagine that and the gifts it brings. And yeah, Tulsi is a plant I use in my practice a lot. I grow it in our altar room just as more of like a worshipable deity, but then I use other varieties as a plant medicine, and I actually just use some in a tea for my girls because it's wonderful for the immune system. I think of Tulsi as, they call it an adaptogen. So it helps our bodies adapt to stress and it helps our immune system adapt to, whatever's coming in, which in our family is constant colds and all the other things you get with small children. Um, so it's just really, it's like a fortifier, it fortifies us from the inside out so that, we can be in community. We can be strong and resilient inside,
Mm.
and then, we can also go into community having energy and having reserves and having a robust immune system, having decreased anxiety, so it's a great plant that I think, yeah, it helps people to move through community and individuality in a really sweet way.
Beautiful. And the holy Dham, or the holy place of Krishna, which is called Sri Vrindavan Dham. Dham means a holy sacred place, is Vrindavan. And Vrindavan is named after Tulsi. Vrinda is another name for Tulsi. So that holy, like you're talking about, the sheltering, fortifying community of trees is what we're talking about. But here, this holy Dham, which
Mm,
is named after the goddess Tulsi.
yeah.
For it's actually a replica of the spiritual world in this 60 square mile area southeast of Delhi. So it's considered to be, all holy places are like a replica of the spiritual, well, like an embassy or an
Ah,
emissary of the spiritual world. So that's really beautiful. And Tulsi's considered a wish fulfilling tree. So whatever you may wish, you can ask Tulsi to help fulfill your wishes. And Krishna always accepts offerings with a tulsi leaf on top.
oh, I love that. Yeah.
It's like she's like like Mother Mary in the Christian tradition. They pray to Mother Mary to access the grace of God. So this idea of intercessionary mentors or personalities. So Tulsi is like an intercessionary goddess who carries our prayers to divinity, to Krishna.
Yeah. That kind of reminds me of tree hugging. It's like
Mhm.
I have a lot of friends in the herbal world who, they're not so sure about God, this idea of this person or this, like thing that's controlling it all, but they do believe in the power of nature. And they do see that there is some universal field that is intelligent and wise. And when you were talking about, Tulsi as being that emissary, that connection to Krishna, it's like I imagine all of my hippie friends and hugging trees and like there as when you hug a tree, maybe you can speak more to this. I know you know a little bit more about the history, but you're connecting to that deep mycorrhizal network. I mean, you're connecting to that whole internet underground, and then all of the branches and, all of that upward energy that's above. And like, if that's not, I mean, my daughter, my youngest one daughter, Summer, she's a tree hugger and she just started doing it when she was 2. And now even in the winter, she'll see a tree. She'll be like, "Mom, I'm going to go hug that tree. That tree needs love." So she believes that it's not she's taking from the tree. She's actually giving to the tree, and that one needs attention. And it's just
That's
such a beautiful there's so many ways. They say there's so many ways to kneel and kiss the earth,
kiss the
right?
ground, right? So beautiful. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, well, the roots of the tree hugging movement, it's really interesting. And again, it mostly comes from the women. It's called the chipko. Chipko actually means to hug. And there was this chipko movement when loggers were up in the Himalayan forests and they were trying to chop down the trees, and the villagers, and they were mostly women. They went and they were hugging the trees, really, at the risk of their own lives. You want to cut this tree, you kill me first. They
Mm.
were hugging the trees to protect the trees from loggers. And it eventually came, this is in the 1970s and 80s, and it eventually came, led to the India's Forest Conservation Act in 1980. And it was calling attention to the interdependence between humans and the natural way of life. So
That's
it's
beautiful.
so beautiful. And I love the idea of your little daughter. You know, she wants to give, and she wants to give and she's receiving. So isn't love so circular? You know, how our roots, if I go up and hug a tree, how my unseen roots will go deep into the earth, into unseen gifts and unseen treasures, you know, and
Yeah.
giving and receiving. It's like, to me, it's almost like a kirtan. Like we were talking about how trees are communicating through the air and through their roots. But, you know, the idea of kirtan, or chanting the holy name, it's like a call and a response. So isn't that beautiful? This circular love that I put out my call and I receive a response, and it goes around and around, and
Mm.
all our interconnectivity and love put out and love received, and gifts get put out and gifts received. Very, very beautiful to me.
Yeah, it really is. And it just, I think in a world where we can feel so isolated and alone, that what we're all the things we're talking about today are just another reminder that we're never alone and that we are so connected to nature, to each other. And as simple as just getting, taking off your shoes and walking on the earth and just having that image, putting your hands up, feet barefoot on the earth. I mean, how can you not feel connected to something larger just in that simple act?
It's so true. You know, you're reminding me, I saw a podcast. It was a TED Talk recently, and this woman was speaking about depression and her experience with depression. She and her husband wanted very, very much to have a baby, and they were trying in vitro, and they were trying in so many ways, and they were getting so depressed and so desperate. And then they started reaching out, to indigenous communities, and taking part in some of the give and take of revealing their minds and their hearts in community with some indigenous people. And all of this, I wish I could remember the name of the podcast. It was a TED Talk. But I guess if we look up depression, it would pop up, because she started receiving so much serendipity and so many gifts. And then, the question came, was she open to adopt? She wanted her own baby. Was she open to adopt? And this so often happens. Maybe you've heard of this yourself. So when they opened themselves up to adopt, some lovely, and they really wanted a little girl, but this lovely, lovely boy came across their world. Someone connected them with someone else, and they found this lovely little boy who just wanted love, and
Mm.
they adopted him. And then practically as soon as they adopted him, she became pregnant with their little girl. It
Wow.
was so
I love
amazing.
that.
So, opening up to the serendipity and the gifts that are beyond my logical, rational, mind, which is really so limiting.
Yeah. And I love that it was, part of that was reaching out to people like an indigenous community who are connected more closely with nature and with the planets and plants and, that larger fellowship.
Yeah.
Um, I know you and I both love Robin Wall Kimmerer, who wrote Braiding Sweetgrass, and just this idea of kinship that we share with the natural world, and how healing that is. And, a lot of anxiety and depression might go away when we realize, as Mary Oliver says, our place among all things, like what is our little place among all things? It can give us a perspective that kind of takes the pressure off a little bit. Like we don't have to do all these big things. We don't have to find our life purpose and then share it with the world and then become a mega star and then leave a 1,000-year legacy. Like actually, it's okay to just live a very simple life.
Yeah.
And be and actually just know your place among all things. Like,
Beautiful. I love the quote from Mother Teresa where she says that we can do no great things, only small things with great love.
mm,
And that's, I think, such important mentoring for all of us, because I think it's a, it's a very Western thing. It's not an indigenous thing, because
yeah,
the indigenous people were so much attuned to nature and the mentor, as you said, the mentorship of nature. As a matter of fact, when my husband and I went up to upstate New York and visited the Seneca Falls, where the first women suffragettes had their, it wasn't even a concept yet, but they had their first conference talking about the idea of women's rights. And eventually it became, actually it was suggested by an African American man, Frederick Douglass, if you don't ask for the vote, you're not going to get any of these other things. But then they found that the Native women that they were meeting in that area, they had so much uh, synchronicity and so much justice between the men and the women in their communities that was unknown in Europe, and among the people in America who'd come from Europe. So yeah, just the to be more attuned to what the indigenous people have gleaned from nature.
yeah,
It's so important.
yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about too just the power we have when we're connected to one another, because I think, when we unite our voices with other like-minded souls, when we, find community and spiritual groups, or, any group where, we feel like we found our group or our tribe, like how empowering that is. And there's this the oldest colony of trees is actually in Utah, and I just found this to be fascinating. So aspen trees don't have their own individual roots, and they don't make babies by seeds. They actually just clone themselves. And so the actual oldest living organism, and the largest and the most weighty by mass, is this huge clonal network of aspen trees. It takes up 116 acres, which is
Wow.
like 42 hectares. I mean, that's like huge. I was looking at a picture of the map, and they say it's about 15,000 years old, this network. So talk about what lasts, like what perseveres. And so, when we try not to make up things on our own, it's like, uh, uh, you know, we all do it. We all are like, well, oh, I have this idea. This is my own unique thing, which not to discredit our own creativity, but there's something that lasts and endures through time when we're a part of something larger,
So beautiful, so beautiful. To me, it's like collecting heirloom seeds as opposed to genetically altered seeds. And I feel like in our culture, we've received genetically altered seeds, not only in terms of seeds themselves, but in our concepts, in our beliefs, in our
Mm.
faith that we accept. It's been genetically manipulated and altered. And if we can move away from that and move closer to that, again, that mentorship of nature, to receive the ancient heirloom knowledge and seeds of and gifts of knowledge.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Oh, so I think our time is coming to a close, but I know you had, I think, one of our shared favorite poems from Mary Oliver. Would you share that with our listeners?
Love to. I would love to. All respects to dear Mary Oliver.
Mm.
So she says, when I am among trees, especially the willows and the honey locust, especially the beech, the oaks, and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness. I would almost say that they save me, and daily. I am so distant from the hope of myself. This is what we were just talking about, right?
Mhm.
In which I have goodness and discernment. And I never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me, the trees stir in their leaves and call out, stay a while. the light flows from their branches and they call again. It's simple, they say. And you too have come into this world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light and to shine.
Mm.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary Oliver. I know, I feel deeply. I feel like she's like, they say that, you're given a birth mother, but you can gather other mothers along the way. I feel like she's in my pocket as a mother figure. So
Walk through the woods, right?
yeah. So thank you for reading that. And what a lovely discussion. I would love for our listeners to reflect back to us, your thoughts and what stood out to you. And if there's any parts of tree life that inspires you or community life that points you back to trees. Right. Like it's so interesting what our community can mirror and share back with us.
Yeah. So I think a message that trees give us is a message of unity and diversity. They're individuals and they're in unity as community, but they're also unique. So I think we need that in human society, a community of unity and diversity, honoring the stranger. I mean, what is community but to welcome the stranger?
Mhm.
And humility is to honor the other. So I think that we need more of this in our human community. Gifts of the tree.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Rukmini. Thank you to all of our listeners and watchers, and we will see you again for another episode next month. Take
Thank you
care,
for this
everyone.
conversation.